Yeah, so first of all, if you look at the options he had, as I just referenced, I won't repeat those, but if you were working for the Kremlin, presumably what the Kremlin would want you to do is take as much information as possible and give it to the Kremlin, not give it to the world, to make the government aware that this information has been pilfered. That's what spies for foreign governments typically have done. They haven't gone to journalistic outlets and asked journalists to curate the material carefully. They've gone and given the material to foreign governments. The other thing is, when Snowden first decided he was going to do this, his main concern was, how do I get this material into journalists' hands and allow them to be able to report this story without having the government stop me? And he knew in order to do that, he needed to go to a place that the U.S. government would have difficulty getting him, would have difficulty stopping us. And he didn't go to Russia in the first instance, nor did he go to China. He went to Hong Kong. And the reason he went to Hong Kong was because Hong Kong, in his view, and I think a lot of people share it, is this place that kind of represents a struggle for freedom. People in Hong Kong have been battling for decades to be free of tyrannical control by mainland China. And every year there are massive protests demanding that they be given greater civic freedom. China has recently cracked down on it, but at the time, it was a place that kind of aligned with what he felt that he was doing, and it was a place the United States would have difficulty getting to. So he called us to Hong Kong, myself and Laura Poitras. We traveled there. And as I said, his instructions were adamant. He was actually a very conservative whistleblower in the sense that I probably would have released more information than I did had it not been for his insistence that we be very cautious with what we release, that we first consult with the United States government and hear them out about any arguments that they have that we might not have been aware of as to why something might be harmful. And there were a couple times the United States government persuaded us not to release things. So had he been working for a foreign power, had he been intending to harm the United States, he would have acted completely differently, as spies in the past have. And the other thing I would add, Ben, is this idea that he's in Russia. The reason he's in Russia is because he tried to get to Latin America, to Bolivia or Ecuador, where they were going to give him asylum. And to get there, he had to transit from Hong Kong, where he was meeting with us, through Russia and then Havana and on to Latin America. Ben Rhodes, in his book, a senior national security official for the Obama administration, boasted of the fact that they knew Snowden was trying to get out of Russia and trying to get to Latin America. And they called the Cubans, at which point they were negotiating the lifting of the embargo with Cuba. And they said, if you have any hope of getting this embargo lifted, you better not let Edward Snowden pass safely through Havana. We want him trapped in Russia. Havana, the Cubans withdrew their offer of safe passage, and they trapped him in Russia. He didn't choose to be in Russia. He never wanted to be in Russia. He has an American wife. He now has 2 kids. He wants to come back home. They trapped him in Russia, and then they turned around and said, oh, look, he's in Russia. That's proof that he's somehow working for a foreign power. All I can tell you is, if that were true, there'd be a lot of things he could have done that he didn't do. And, there were times that, the New York Times or the Washington Post made decisions about what to do with some of these stories that we shared with them. And he was really angry because he felt like some of the things they published should not have been published. He only wanted things the American people should know to be published. He didn't want to help foreign terrorist organizations and the rest. The other thing, as far as the seriousness of the leaks are concerned, there's no doubt that what he took and gave to us is the biggest leak in American national security history. The amount of documents, I've never put an exact number on it on purpose, but it's extremely high. Many of them were very sensitive documents. But as I said, I think the percentage of documents that we've published is something, it's definitely under 5%, probably closer to 2 or 3%. And the reason, again, was because he was extremely insistent that we not publish things that could put anybody's life in danger. Even the U.S. government admits that they can't point to a single person whose life was in danger. We never published the names of any agents or anything like that. And as I said, there were a couple times when the American government convinced me that if we were to publish a story for reasons I didn't know, it could actually endanger people. And on a couple of occasions, we held back information for that reason. So, he lives in the United States. His family lives in the United States. Much of my family lives in the United States. Nobody wants to endanger American citizens. That was never part of the story. The part of the story was, let's have disclosure so that the Congress can decide whether or not these agencies need to be reined in. And just to quickly add to the kind of how that story ended, once we did those revelations, there was this incredibly interesting bipartisan coalition that arose in Congress, led by Justin Amash, that young then Tea Party Republican, in partnership with John Conyers, one of the most left-wing members of Congress, to rein in the NSA, and it would have passed had it not been for the fact that Nancy Pelosi worked hand in hand with the leaders of the Republican caucus in the Obama White House to save the NSA from reform. And that was when I really started, my eyes were opened up, and I realized most of our political differences, or at least many of them, are not definable by left versus right or Democratic versus Republican, but instead pro-establishment versus anti-establishment. And that was a really vivid example of it. There's an article in Foreign Policy magazine from 2013 headlined "Nancy Pelosi Saved the NSA." And if that doesn't tell that story, I don't know what does.